Hi class, I'm sorry I couldn't be there today, but I wanted to talk about things that need to get done. So one, make sure you turn in your essay to my mailbox. So don't leave it in the room, don't leave it on the desk, just put it on in my mailbox on the second floor, and Mr. Weisberger will pick them up at the end of the day so I can look at them. Additionally, we are going to start topic 4, and in doing topic 4, we're really trying to get an idea or a better idea of the IA as well. So we're going to be looking at a project or a lab and trying to write parts of the IA. So I want to go through some of the basics with you again. So just looking at this information, this is, our current assessment model. So it started 2017. It'll be the one used through your examinations as well. So paper 1 we already looked at. Paper 1, the weighting is 25%. It's an hour. Okay, that's the case study like the one that we just looked at. Then there's paper 2, which is the short answers. The previous paper 2 for 2017 looked very similar to your exam at the semester. So some of those were the 2017. A lot of them actually were the 2017 questions. And then there were some other questions as well because we hadn't covered all of the content within that exam. So it's the short answers, and then it's the structured essays, and there'll be 2 of them. So that is 50% of the grade, and it's 2 hours. Then you'll have your internal assessment, which will be an individual investigation. Now, obviously, when we're modeling it this time, we'll be looking at the same topic so that we can practice, okay, together. But you will be individually accountable for your write-up portions of this assignment. The weighting for that is 25%. And it says the duration is 10 hours. I'm sure if you talk to some people would spend a lot more than 10 hours on it, and some people maybe they didn't, and that probably is reflected within their grades as well. All right, so jumping to the next part that people are going to be concerned about is length. So it says the report should be 1,500 to 2,250 words long, and then it says that the external moderators will actually stop reading at the 2250 mark, so you need to make sure that it doesn't go beyond that limit. Okay, so keep it there. Now, today I'm going to show you a rubric. So I'm going to pull up the rubric and I'll jump to that in just a second. Okay, so this document is the rubric. So this is the internal assessment criteria rubric. And this is what we're going to be referring to within this activity that we're doing within this unit, as well as in the future. So our IA has the following components. It says identifying the context, planning, as you're required to plan some sort of study. Okay, a lot of the really high quality ones require some sort of laboratory planning. So it's something that you're doing in the field or something that you're modeling within the classroom. Okay, so you need to have some sort of planning section that's detailed, okay, and related to a specific ESS topic. Then results analysis and conclusion. So that's key. So whatever data you're collecting or you're using, whether you're using some other sources of data or you're collecting your own data, that information has to be complete and in there. So we're talking data tables, graphs, an analysis of what the information is that you collected. And then it says discussion and evaluation, application, and communication. So this is our breakdown of the rubric. So looking at those different sections, we're going to pick and choose the sections, I think, for this time. I don't think we'll do all of them, though potentially we could, just depending on the time that we have allotted. We will definitely do this. So we're going to ask you to start this actually now or after today. For homework, you should be looking at identifying the context for the project that we'll be looking at. So let's jump to that rubric. So each section has its own individual rubric. So identifying the context. So this is where you're really laying out what you're doing in the IA. It has to be clearly related to ESS topics. Those issues that you bring up can be, like it says, either local or global, and it should include some sort of layout of the investigation that you plan on completing throughout this report. So we're going to jump to the 5-6 area because that's what we're hopefully all shooting for. So if you look at the 5-6 area. So this is out of 6 points. Okay, so it's not out of 7, but it's out of 6 points for this section. It says states a relevant, coherent, and focused research question. So for the first activity, we'll all be researching the same thing. It'll just be up to you to, to word it as a well worded and constructed question in order to put it into your report. Okay, the discussion is relevant to the environmental issues. Okay, and you have to provide the context for the research question. So you have to discuss how it relates to ESS, and this section should really include some citations. So it should include some reliable pieces of information from outside sources that you are using in order to set up the context. Then it says it explains the connections between the environmental issue, okay, and the research question. So you can't just discuss the issue and then lay out the question. You have to make those connections explicit. So you really have to say what you think it is that you're planning to achieve and how you're going to achieve that. Right, planning. So planning is saying how you are going to collect some information. How are you going to collect this data, whether it's qualitative or quantitative? What techniques are you going to use? What are your variables going to be? Okay, what exactly are you doing in the IA? Again, this section is 6 points. So if we look, it says 5 to 6 designs are repeatable. So that means that someone else could do exactly what you did. A repeatable method appropriate to the research question that allows for the collection of sufficient and relevant data. So for us, we will be doing something together. So we'll lay out exactly what it is that we're doing and how we're going to design it. And then it justifies the choice of the sampling strategy used. So we're going to be modeling something in the first one. So in reality, the modeling could be part of it, but if you were doing an IA, you'd probably want to, for the topic that we're looking at, you'd probably want to go out into the field as well to collect some actual samples. Then it describes the risk assessment and ethical considerations where applicable. So that kind of depends on what you're picking and choosing for this. It might be, like it says, applicable, and it might not be super applicable and relevant depending on your topic. All right, results, analysis, and conclusion. Again, 6 points. We will definitely be doing this section with the practice IA structure that we're going to be using. So it says constructs diagrams, charts, graphs that are relevant to the quantitative and or qualitative data. So we are definitely going to need to do that. So we're going to be making some data tables. Hopefully we'll be making some graphs. We are going to be analyzing the information. I also think it's good, and students have done good jobs in the past with including like pictures. So if you take color images and include them as well, kind of justify that you actually did the experiment or you did the lab. I think that that's always a bonus as well. Then the analysis of the data is correct. So it's not just that we made a chart or we made a diagram or we made a data table, but we have to discuss what it means. We have to show some patterns. Okay, we might need the line of best fit, some standard deviation, etc., to show that the data is significant, or perhaps it's not significant, just depending on what we did and what our results were. Then we're looking for interpretation. So what are the trends, patterns? What does it all mean? Okay, and how can we make conclusions about the data that we're looking at? You'll see there's actually a lot more information within each section, so I would like you to read through this on your own. So once we complete our results, analysis, and conclusion, then we get to this section, which is discussion and evaluation. So we're really trying to evaluate the conclusions that we've made in the context of that environmental issue. So when we're looking at this, if we're talking about, nutrient pollution and dead zones, we are going to be needing to evaluate our data and what it means in that context. And it says discusses strengths, weaknesses, and limitations of the method used. This is extremely important. This is where we're looking at possible sources of error, okay, something that might have caused your results to vary from the expected. This This is huge. So this is actually one of those scientific skills that we might need to build a little bit, especially for people who do not have the strongest science background, because it is really important as a scientist to be able to analyze the possible things that could have gone wrong, and that could have limited the accuracy of your research. And then suggestions, so you can suggest modifications to address some of those weaknesses. And in fact, if you wanted to, when you are doing your actual IA, if you feel like your results were very weak to begin with, then you should just repeat it. Okay, so you should repeat whatever it was that you were doing in order to correct some of those errors, and then you could discuss it within your report. You also see this, so it says further areas of research, so that's how you could potentially extend what you've already done, um, to have a more complete and thorough and informative study. So the next section is application. You'll see that this is 3 points, not 6 points. The application is when we really want to talk about like what can we do with this information. So how can we use the information that you collected to deal with the environmental issue, because this is an ESS class. So to deal with the environmental issue that we've selected. So in our model, if we're talking again about nutrient pollution and dead zones, like how can we use the information that we collect to create some type of solution, and what should be next steps. Again, then you're supposed to evaluate potential strengths, weaknesses, and limitations to the solution. I think that, as long as you're thinking through it, should be very doable. The last part of your grade says communication. This is again 3 points. This is like the grammar and structure portion of the ESS IA. So 3 points, it should be well structured and organized. I am going to ask you to use certain section headers, though you can see through the examples that people have chosen different types of headers depending on their topic. It's consistent, appropriate terminology, concise, all right, so that's, really, this is a writing issue. So is it concise? Is it getting to the point? Is it logical and coherent? So that's just looking at the grammar and structure of this. And that should be extremely doable, because this is something that you'll need to work through multiple drafts. So you should be improving the structure. You should be improving the organization. Okay, it should be ready to go when you turn it in, and it should be the best report that you could possibly provide. Okay, so now I'm going to show you this website. So this is a website of sample IAs. It's just from the IB. If you look, there's a whole range of different topics, but they're really good to look at structure, to look at how people organize the information, and to look at what's getting a good grade and what is not. So if you click around, you'll actually see there's a range of grades. You can find, 6, 7, you can find like a 3 and a 4 or 2. So look around. We're going to take a look quickly. I'm going to open this one. It says example 5. Example 5 is someone who earned 28 out of 30, so that's a solid 7. Okay. If we open the student work, hopefully it'll load quickly. Perfect. So this person, all right, let me see. So this person's work we're going to look at, so it says environmental issue, particulate black carbon, air pollution, and the contribution of the urban heat island effect. So this is something that we haven't discussed yet. It'll come up a little bit later next year. But I want you just to think about structure. So as you're going through, okay, this person is setting up the context. They have quite a long introduction, really, to the idea. You can see that it includes citations, so in-text citations. They're annotated here with a number, and then at the bottom there's a work cited, so at the last page. So they're laying out all of this. It says the goals of the investigation, and then they're laying out separately their research question. Okay, so that's, I think, a necessity. Then as they go on, they're kind of explaining the outline of what's going to happen. So this is their planning for their investigation. So they just made a data table, and I think that this is actually a really good idea within the science, within the standard science classes, but also within the ESS class, to lay out the variables and what they mean, what their units might be, and why you're choosing them. So they're looking at just a simple chart to explain their variables. Then they consider some safety and ethical considerations, and then they're actually just listing their materials. So I mean, if we choose to do this section for our class, I mean, this is something that I think we should be able to do quite easily because I will be guiding you through it. Now, this person ideally should be planning this and implementing it on their own, so that's a little bit more challenging. All right, so now